Okay. Welcome to the Terra Firma Teacher Roundtable. We're a group of passionate, dedicated teachers who meet regularly to discuss the state of education and how to bring the focus back to effective, time proven methods. We are located all across North America and Europe and share a common philosophy about teaching and learning. Of course, we know that teaching is a challenging profession and there are many approaches and styles to instruction, so we aren't trying to claim we have all the answers. But we do have a significant amount of experience that includes many successes and failures. So we hope you can find a bit of guidance, wisdom, maybe eke out a chuckle or two from time to time. And we're hoping to bring insightful conversation that helps not only teachers, but administrators and parents as well as understand what it's like in the trenches. I would take a quick minute to introduce ourselves. My name is Tyson. I've been teaching for 22 years. I'm in the Pacific Northwest and I have juniors and seniors in AP classes. I do government and politics, comparative government, and economics. Bonnie.
I'm Bonnie. I've been an English teacher and I've also been a high school guidance counselor. I'm not currently teaching, but I was in high schools and these were on the East Coast, up and down the East Coast seaboard. Oh, I taught English. I don't know if I said that. Yep.
Okay. And Cassie.
Hi, I'm Cassie. I teach in Canada. I teach high school English and history. Yeah.
Okay. Jordan.
Yeah, I'm Jordan. I've been an English teacher for 20 years. 10 of those were in a large Catholic school in New Jersey. 7 of them were in a small private school in New Jersey. And then I moved to the South for freedom. And I teach in a public high school, a large public high school. I have all 6 sections of 10th grade English at the moment.
Okay. And Paul.
Hi, yeah, my name's Paul. I teach in New York City. I teach at a charter school in the Bronx. We're a new school. It's only 9s and 10s, and so I teach 9th grade algebra. I've got 6 sections of about 130 kids in all. And this is my first year there. I had previously taught at a one of the fancy downtown schools in Manhattan. It was a private school. That we had our differences, and I parted ways with them about 3 years ago.
Okay. So this being our first time really doing this, we get together and talk twice a week. But we thought it'd be a good idea just as an introduction to talk about why we teach in the first place. I think people on the outside who haven't done it don't really quite understand what goes into it, and probably what motivates somebody to become a teacher. And so just overall, why do you teach? Why did you become a teacher? Did you consider anything else? And we could start with same order, Bonnie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I mention I was an English major in college, so I think that's how I ended up teaching, was trying to find a way to turn that into a career. And maybe this is interesting. I actually was recruited to do alternate route, so I didn't go to an ed school. I just was thrown into the classroom, and that is a possibility. Many states still offer alternate route, and one of my themes is going to be try teaching, because I think that we have so many people who are critical of teachers. It's not as easy as it looks done well. We've probably all had some bad teachers, and that when people, they make it look easy, right? When it's done really well. So, but beyond just life necessities, why teach? I think that I'm reminded of the line from the Canterbury Tales, and gladly would he learn and gladly teach, I guess. And I think that I'm sort of a lifelong learner, and teaching really fits with that. The last 17 years, I actually was able to teach. I have a doctor of education and counseling, and I was able to teach psychology classes, and I like to think I sort of earned my master's in psychology having done that. Give me a textbook and I can teach it. So I would also say that I think everyone should try teaching or should teach something at some time in their life. I don't think there is any better, except maybe the military, crash course in self-development than teaching.
Okay, Cassie, what's your story?
My turn. Okay. So I haven't been teaching for very long. I'm only in my third year. But every time I think about this question, I come back to the idea that I'm kind of obsessed with human potential. Like, I find it so exciting that people can be great things and do great things. And especially kids and young people, they're just like these little vessels of potential, and you get to help them unlock it. And it's kind of like that Peterson saying that you're not everything you could be, but you could be so much more. And I feel like that's why I teach. It's like helping kids identify those things that they could be and help them get there. So yeah.
Okay, Jordan.
It's interesting that you went in that direction, Cassie, because I found for the majority of my teaching time that I explained it in the opposite sense. I wanted to be an English professor. That's what I always thought I would do because I love books. And in the early 2000s, when I was looking into going to school for that at the University of Pennsylvania, it just seemed like if you really love books, the last thing you want to get is a PhD in English, because it was all jargon, terminology, postmodern craziness, and there was going to be no real love of literature. And so I thought, what is this? What am I doing? And sort of backed my way into teaching. And I kept that attitude. I had a principal once. Every year, when the teachers would return for our opening meetings, the principal would say, "We're all here for the same reason, because we love children." And I would look around at everybody, my neighbors, and say, "Not me. I'm here because I love books." I used to say for years, I have a weird job for someone who doesn't like other people's children or getting up early. But it was interesting. I did it for a long time, and I used that line many times. And then when the COVID thing happened, I remember staring at the screen, black screen, and I wrote it to my students at the time. It's not the same. It is not the same without you in the room. There's something about the dynamic of running a book club with other people that was not replaceable via screen, and it sucked the joy out of it. So even though I was still teaching the book and I thought, well, I'm doing this because I love the book. I love Othello. I'll teach Othello to these kids. Well, when they were all behind screens and I was still teaching Othello, it lost all meaning and all joy. And it sort of reframed my thinking on why I do it. And I think now more that I can see there is a value, like a social value, that I'm creating an environment for young people to experience literature and experience art and be guided through that. And that process is where the fun is. And yes, I love the books, but the books are nothing without people to teach them too. So,
Jordan, if I could just side note, you and I both dropped out of an English PhD program for apparently the same reasons. And I've met other people as well. That might be a side discussion.
Yeah, I mean, at the time they wanted you to declare your school of criticism going into it. You know, you had to say, "I'm a Bakhtinian," or I'm a this, or I'm a that. And I was saying, how about we just keep reading? I'm 22 years old. I don't know what I am. I'm not going to pledge allegiance to Foucault at this point. You know, I'd rather read more books.
Well, and they didn't call it like a doctor of literary criticism anyway. Where do you go to learn to write great literature? That's what I'd like to know. But we need to hear from Paul.
Yeah, it's funny. I might be the third one here that is a failed graduate student, because I wanted to become a professor too. I wanted to go in it, and I got kind of had a mental breakdown after undergrad with all this postmodern stuff, and I went way into it. I went deep into it. I was a believer, and my brain kind of deconstructed, and I wound up wandering the earth for a decade or something. Like, I basically had odd jobs or whatever.
They deconstructed you.
Yeah, I got deconstructed. I found teaching later in life. I found it in my 40s, and I got back into it from tutoring SAT. So I was tutoring the SAT math section because even though I had been chewed up by the humanities, and I found books that I loved, and it became a whole thing that um, was just too unstable and unstable making for me. And I went back to math in my 40s and just like taught myself calculus again. I realized why I loved it in high school. I started tutoring the SAT, and then I got a master's degree in educational psychology because I thought that was interesting. And then I was able to get my first. I taught at some public schools doing SAT prep, and then I went into my first real job was at Grace Church School. 2012, I got hired there as a math teacher. And for me, teaching is like I just love the beauty. I love math as a aesthetic subject. It's almost like I'm an art appreciation teacher, and like, look how this fits together. Like there's this incredible beauty in this. And I wanted the kids to experience that same appreciation that I had. Like if you walk into a great cathedral and you're showing like the architecture of this thing, for me, math is the architecture of the universe, really. It's the language of physics. It's everything. And so, as I was doing it, my first years, I sucked. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing, and there was no professional development in my master's program. The professional development in the school that I was teaching at was complete garbage. It was undoing racism, anti-racism. It was DEI. It was woke this, woke that. Nothing about classroom management. Nothing about how to actually structure a lesson. Nothing about how to actually the psychology of how to get of learning and learn and how children learn and everything. It was all this complete nonsense. And I kept begging the people there, like, please get me some classroom because I can't control the class. I know I'm doing something wrong, and I know that this is not working. And they were like, yeah, but they felt that was a little bit too, fascist or something to worry about that. And I was like, well, and I went kind of looking myself, but I figured I must be doing something wrong because they were pushing all this pedagogy, which was inquiry and constructivism. And, it would take.
Paul, this was at your private school?
This was at Grace. Yeah, this was at Grace Church, which was the $60,000 a year now downtown elite NIAS private school. And they didn't care about any of that stuff. They seemed to be running on this engine of prestige where it's like, well, you're going to get to build a relationship with these kids and they're going to come to see you as, and that wasn't entirely wrong. Like you do need to have some kind of, that's the thing that actually makes teaching get you up in the morning every day, because you do have this interaction with the kids and it gives you energy and it's great. And they're learning, and when things are going well, it's great. Anyway, this is a very long-winded career summary, but eventually, it didn't work out there. So I took a job at an uptown school, a charter school, through a friend of mine who started a school. And it's in many ways, it's a very different population, but in many ways it's exactly the same. So far it's been great. And it's, like every year, every teacher sort of experiences a year of teaching as just a really long drive, and there's just, it preoccupies you completely, almost takes over completely, I think, in that period of time. And, it's just when you're in the middle of it, it's an odyssey, right? And every year is an odyssey, and you go through it again. And if you care, you keep redoing everything. Every time you do it, you're redoing everything, trying to make it better, trying to improve. And, I like that about it. But for me, it was really just an aesthetic thing. I wanted to share the beauty of, math.
I find it really interesting, Paul, that you ran the gamut from English to math. I mean, I couldn't teach 8th grade math, but maybe that book, we need to hear from Tyson though.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I took a long and winding road as well. When I was younger, I moved around a lot due to some family issues, and over time, I started to get sort of detached from school. I got put into these accelerated programs, and I kind of burned out, which is weird to say, but like by high school, I was kind of done. And so my hometown that I lived in was pretty small, and people went off to college, but it wasn't. I remember going into my counselor's office and said, "I think I want to go to college," and they said, "Well, here's some brochures to DeVry Institute, like a technical college." Um, and but never really having I had some good teachers. I had some teachers that were a little shaky, but nobody ever really, said, "Hey, you got a lot of potential. You could do this or that." And so when I went off to college, I found out that I wasn't prepared. I didn't know how to study. I didn't have a lot of background knowledge because, I didn't know how to have the discipline to do homework because I just took a lot of shortcuts. And once I figured it out, I thrived. But then I went to work in the business world, and I had, in my 20s, my focus was kind of coaching. I wanted to be able to coach football, and I knew that in the environment I was in, working 12, 13, 14-hour days, that was not going to happen. So went back to school, started out getting a business degree, or a business, because I had a business degree, but a business ed degree. And after sitting through classes like Microsoft Word for an entire quarter, I pulled the ripcord on that and switched to history. And I kind of, like, I did a long-term emergency sub for special ed, which was good to get the experience in that. My wife works with in special education. And but then when I got the job in the district I'm in now, it's your survival. That whole first year is survival, but seeing kids, kind of quote unquote get it, seeing the light come on. It's sort of an addicting thing, right? When you're doing something kind of difficult. And at the time I was doing sixth grade language arts. So I'm doing like writing, and to see a kid evolve in their writing over time, that became like, I remember one time I went in my first year, I was, dorky new teacher, and I'm running down the hall to my principal going, "Look at the difference in this kid's writing." And they're like, yeah, that's pretty good. But like for me, that was amazing. And then uh getting into high school, I got into, the history and economics and gov now. And the two things are that one is these what I teach applies directly to everyday life. And so we could constantly pull news headlines and all these different things and say, like, this is this concept in practice. Today in Gov, we had a good question or a good discussion about what the political science textbooks say and how things actually work. And so I like that, and it makes a connection for kids, and hopefully they can start to see a little bit more of the world around them. But then the other major thing was when I had kids and I started to care about the education they were getting once they started school and how important it was, and watching them grow. And then I started to see the faces in my classroom more as like these are all somebody's kid, and like I'm responsible for helping shape their future, because if they don't know anything, they're not going to be able to get a job, they're not going to be able to function. And so now I really have that. It's kind of like this crazy. I'm sure my students think I'm crazy because every day start class talking about something about, like, you got to think ahead. Where are you going to be in 10 years? Where are you going to be in 20 years? And kids just don't think that way anymore. And so it's kind of come full circle to where I really wish that one of my teachers would have said at some point, "Hey, where are you going to be in 20 years? You know, start thinking about your future." And then that probably, and I got to take responsibility for it. I was a teenage kid who didn't, do everything I was supposed to. But at the same time, there just wasn't that voice. And so I think now I'm teaching to, help shape kids' futures and help maybe give them something, help them find something interesting. There's nothing better than a kid who tells you that they got into college and they're going to study economics and they never thought about doing it before, but they're going to major in econ, at least for a while before they get too far into it. I feel like that's your big reward. That's our major payday that we get. So
People talk a lot about teacher pay, just making me think, and there's this standard line, talk about the mercenary reasons to teach. There's the intangible reasons, but I I don't think teachers are actually paid that badly, incidentally. I've read that two teachers or a teacher married to a policeman are in the top 10% in most of incomes in most communities. So, a bit of a digression, but that's a reason to teach. You want a pension? Become a teacher.
Well, and you get, you're not going to get ridiculously wealthy, but my
Right.
wife and I both work in schools. We live a pretty comfortable middle class lifestyle. But the other thing that you get that, you can't really put into numbers on a paycheck is when you do have kids in the summertime,
Yeah.
you get to spend a lot of time with them. And, you can travel over breaks. The first job that I had, they made it pretty clear, like over Christmas, you don't leave. Well, my
Mm,
family or my wife's family lives, 1,000 miles away. So that's not going to work. Um, and the other thing is too, and I don't as a teacher take the entire summer off. I'm working a lot. It's just at my own pace, but I'm thinking about next year and try, tinkering with things. And so it's not, 2 months of just relaxation, but it does allow you to slow down, take a deep breath, reevaluate, and at the same time, you get to kind of be a dad and do all that stuff too.
Yeah, and I want to say, it's funny that the pay scale. Maybe that statistic, Bonnie. It's like, um, I think it's harder for younger teachers because they're down on the pay scale. A lot of the contract negotiations, um, they favor, I think, the older teachers, and of course, if they're trying to buy a home, there's tremendous inflation in home prices. So, they're a lot of them don't feel that, even though, maybe they could do a little better with the money that they're making. Um, our society, our economics have changed so much in the last 20 years that it might be different for them. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what Cassie thinks about that.
Yeah, it's not great where I am on the pay scale and where I am in terms of geography in Canada. We don't get paid very well here. So my full-time salary right now, I also tutor on the side. If I didn't tutor on the side, I don't think I'd be able to live the quality of life that I want to live in terms of like rent and just like monthly spending. So it could be better, especially since I also have a master's degree and it just doesn't cover everything. Yes, could be better, at least where I am in Canada, considering the level of taxes that we pay and rent. Yeah.
And younger teachers need to be able to save, particularly if they have ambitions to buy a house at some point. Like, it's very difficult to save, I think right now in this environment economically. It can be done, but like it's tough.
Yeah, out of the question right now buying a house, but would be nice.
Yeah.
One of my memories of my teachers growing up at the Jersey Shore was how many of them ran side businesses, um, and and also what public figures they are, and how well known they were in the community. And I grew up near a boardwalk, and many of them worked at or owned stands at the boardwalk, and just what celebrities they were among the boardwalk population. It's a fond memory. Just so summer jobs and teachers were, traditionally where it was a thing.
Yeah, that is always a nice aspect of it. My side job was always coaching, and coaching allows you to have such an impact in another way, and your interactions are a lot different. They're a lot more loose. In the two sports I coach was football and track is different because you're managing all the age groups and you got boys and girls out there, and so that it's hard because there's a gazillion of them and they're spread out all over, and you're just trying to kind of keep track of everybody. But in football, that's it allows you to kind of develop an interpersonal relationship with the kid because you're coaching them in a much more well-rounded way. So I mean, it's like in the classroom, you're trying to get somebody educated, but kind of teaching them how to be a learner, teaching them how to approach difficult things. And in football, it's the same way. You're teaching dedication and commitment. Because at the end of the day, in football, what you're asking a young man to do is go run full speed into a bunch of other people. And not every kid is wired for that. And it's hard to convince a kid to come back to the afternoon practice when you spent the morning in 95-degree weather, and they're tired and worn out. And
That's what you're asking a teacher to do, is to run into a wall of people.
I don't know what the answer is to the economic questions. I don't know if merit pay is a good idea or anything like that, but I do know there's a perverse disincentive to be a good teacher in many ways. I mean, I've seen it recently in the public system, in the sense that the very top teachers, the best ones, they cash out by going to administration. So, you take the best teachers out and say, you've done such a great job, let's get you out of the classroom and get you paid, and all of a sudden they're a vice principal of this or that or whatever. And even, the nature of the job itself, especially as a writing teacher, the better job I do, the harder I have to work.
Yes.
The more I create work for myself, every
Yes.
paper I assign, everything that I do, you're doing it well if you're killing yourself and you're doing it, you feel like I should be doing less, but that is, for the teachers who are willing to sit there and just watch the clock spin and collect their check, why work harder when you don't have to, unless you really want to? And, so I don't know how to fix those incentives or those structures or whatever, but every time I hear someone say, boy, we should pay teachers more, it's on the one hand, you say, yes, that's true. They do a valuable thing. But at the same time, there's a lot of bad ones that don't deserve a single other nickel, So I don't know what the answer is, but it's not the structure we currently have.
I had a moment, Jordan, this week where I've done something to change up my lesson. Like I spent some extra time to do this thing a little differently that I was going to see if it was going to work. And, it was working. And then I was immediately like kind of depressed because like, oh, I'm going to have to do this every time, aren't I? And like, yes, but at the same time, you're just so happy that it worked that like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do it. And I'm not even going to complain because it's just, but there's that moment where you're like, oh no, it's working. I've got to do this. So that's pretty funny.
Well,
But
and if I could start an argument, there is this idea. My first year of teaching, I convinced myself that English teacher is the hardest job in the entire school, and that every other subject is much easier to teach. So that's an interesting topic as well. I don't know.
But there's we're Bonnie and I know Catherine Burblesing, who is a teacher of, she's known as the strictest headmistress in Britain. She has a school in Wembley, which is a pretty rough neighborhood near London. And she says this thing, I think it's true. Teaching is like the easiest job in the world to do badly and the hardest one to do well. And that kind of goes to what you're saying, is that, if you just want to punch in and out, can't beat, 3 months off and, go home by 4 or whatever. But if you want to do a good job, it is very, very challenging and really, really tough. And you're never bored because you constantly have to reinvent for a new year, new circumstances, new culture, new kids, new subjects, new sections and so on. And you're right. The incentives are that, these teachers that succeed, they rise to, I wouldn't say they rise to their level of incompetence. They rise to a place where competence is something else. It's got nothing to do with teaching. It's about management, right? You become management, and then you lose the competence in the classroom.
Yeah, it's bureaucracy, which ruins everything it touches. Particularly the classroom, which it's one of the only jobs where a single adult individual is in complete control at all times. There's almost no other job that's like that. And there's also no lonelier job in that sense, that almost no other adults work in environments where they are not interacting with other adults for 95% of the time they're at work. I mean, at least 95% of the time I'm at work, I am not interacting with other adult human beings. I'm strictly interacting with 16-year-olds at this point. So it takes a unique, it's a unique challenge. I've tried to put it that way to other people that have different jobs, you know, just to explain, how would you do if you didn't have any work colleagues at all, except these people who were not your equals, and you had to somehow manage them every day? And people don't really think about it that way, but it's a unique challenge.
And every year you get older, but they're always 16.
I think in a weird way, working harder makes it easier because for me, like I subbed for a very short period of time and I knew it was going to be a long day. If you look at the sub plan and it says kids got something to work on, don't worry about it, you know, just turn them loose. It's like that's not going to work because the behaviors are going to come, the revolving door to the bathroom, all that stuff. And so what I learned pretty quickly is that if you want it to be a relatively easier job, you put in the work, know your I think knowing your content's number one because if you know your content well enough, you can think of all sorts of different ways to approach it. You can interact with kids, you can answer questions. I couldn't imagine, and you know, to be honest, I think there's a school of thought that, well, you know, content's secondary and it's not always important if teachers know their content, but I mean, that to me makes it easier. And yeah, the extra work comes in putting all the preparation in and the assessments and the grading, but I would much rather put in some extra time and create some really good materials and a lesson that you could use than try to manage 30 kids who are, you know, bouncing off the walls and slapping each other in the head. That to me is a nightmare.
A good, they say, or a good lesson plan is the best classroom management tool. If you're prepared, things are
Totally. Yeah, totally.
go well.
And it takes, you know, 3 hours of prep to make a good lesson. Even
And
even if you have something already done to shape it for the right, you know, for the right classroom.
yeah.
And that requires freedom to have good ideas. I mean, I know one of the things that has been interesting for me to try to balance is going from these different environments, right? From a large private school to a small one, a small private school to a public school. How much freedom you have in the classroom as a teacher to make decisions on the fly, whether they're curricular or just like activities that seem like a good idea, what you can present in front of the kids. The push towards standardization of lesson plans and things like that, as if teachers were sort of cogs in a machine that could be swapped out. That just does not work at all. The only way to be really, really effective is to be able to have a good idea and implement it like on the spot sometimes, and to feel that kind of freedom and not like, you know, you're just another part of the machine.
There's also this very concerning trend away from textbooks and teachers downloading lesson plans off of the internet, which I think is really what's the word for it? You know, it's just so much more superficial than what you get out of a traditional textbook, and I think many schools are moving away from them.
I think there's a way that, you know, teachers pay teachers and all these different things can be useful,
Mhm.
and a way that it can be a total crutch and exactly what you're saying, Bonnie. You have to have a discerning mind about, okay, sometimes you go looking just for some idea to get you going because you don't even know where to start. But you want to take it and make it your own and customize it and do everything. But if you just kind of, I think a lot of times people just pull it, you know, some teachers that maybe don't know their subject well, they're going to pull it off the internet, they're going to plop it down, and it's not going to have any life in it.
Just like the students, and you know, we're supposed to teach kids how to be discerning consumers of internet content, and you know, physician, heal thyself, right?
And it's why the quality of the textbook matters so much too, though. I mean, and that's, you know, that's a source of disagreement and, you know, almost political tension and that kind of stuff. But it is true that if the textbook is bad, then that ties the teacher's hands as well. I mean, even the state textbooks that I'm using right now do not have one single complete work of literature in them. I mean, there's some poetry and stuff, but it's all excerpts, and it's all written on horrible quality paper. They're disposable. It's like cobbled together with no real discernible thought behind it. So as the quality of the text itself descends, then you put that in the hands of teachers and you don't know what you're going to get.
Now, Tyson, you use primary sources, right? Like, do you got, and Jordan, you too, like do you just like throw all those stuff away?
I just ignore the textbook. I mean, the fact that the textbook has one scene from Macbeth in it, well, I just said, well, I'll just teach Macbeth. So check it off the list of the curriculum. I'm doing it, but like, I don't know what the percentage of teachers are that are just doing the one scene, and how effective can you possibly be teaching one scene from a larger, you know, out of context from a larger work? It's not going to work. So I've used the textbook all of 4 days this year just to check off something that was in the mandated curriculum. But other than that, yeah, I'm using.
So where did you get the whole play?
From our library. I said I need 30 copies.
Oh.
And they were fine with that.
So you read it all in class, because you must have 100 kids.
Yep, we do it all in class, and we perform it, and we get up, and, you know, there's lots of ways to do it. But I did that with novels. I mean, you know, checked out 30 copies of Lord of the Flies, and that was what we did for a few weeks or whatever. So it hamstrings you on what you can send home. But, you know, homework is so 1980s anyway, right?
English really is the one subject that is all primary sources, right? Until you get to graduate school, and then you're reading critiques of the literature. You're no longer reading the works. But Tyson, you were gonna. Paul had asked you about primary sources.
Oh yeah, for government I do, because we have to do some of the Federalist Papers, and we have to do, you know, there's some court cases that we have to do. So you could look at opinions, but you know, sometimes those get a little bit into the weeds. But I don't have a textbook for economics. I just kind of pull my own stuff, or if I have time, I make it, which is really challenging. But I mean, it's definitely difficult to, and that does hinder your ability to send something home, because you know, in the old days, you know, they just send the book home with you, answer the questions in the back or something like that. So you know, you're creating everything as you go, and then there's also times when I'll make something and think, oh, this is great, and then you give it to them, it's like, that doesn't really work as well as you thought. So you spent all that time, and it just kind of ends up being a waste.
Do kids still have to cover their textbooks with paper bags? Is that still a thing?
I haven't seen that in a long time.
No.
No, the textbooks are essentially made out of paper bags at this point.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny in math when the textbooks, I've never seen a good. I mean, I know there are some but like they're all from the 70s and 80s, so I can't really get them anymore on math. But I'll make copies or sometimes. But I realize, like, the thing is, try to boil down the definition to something which is as plain and clear as possible, in common English words, right? Because math, like the way the old textbooks used to do, just plop down the definition and then problem, and like, so I have my little grab bag of metaphors, right? Like from classic movies, classic music, and I'll try to use that to sort of help them visualize what's going on with this function, or how to think about domain and range, and so on, or exponents or whatever. And it kind of livens things up a little bit. But I realize, like, the definition, this to be as clear definitionally as possible in the plainest English possible, so that they feel like they can, you know, maybe it's not 100% exactly what it is. If I was going to get fussy about later math, you know, how that would look back on it, but it's enough to like get a medium resolution understanding of what's going on.
Well,
That's an access point that they can start doing problems, right? And they can start to pick up how this works. And there's this big debate in math that's been going on since, you know, for decades now, between, you know, do you give them the problem first so they can sort of figure it out on their own, and discover their own approach? And, or do you present the material and have them just start doing procedures? And in the process, they kind of understand the concepts. And I'm more in the latter camp. I do think that there are some inquiry approaches that can be good, but they have to be super structured. And, um, it's a lot of times you don't know what you're doing until you start doing it. You don't
Well,
understand
I
why you do it.
cried over many a 70s and 80s math textbook. I think if you have any of those, they might have tear traces from me in them. I think we have
Yeah.
gotten better at teaching math. And I'm reminded of this saying from Einstein that you don't know anything until you can explain it to a 6-year-old. And I think that's something that is worth aspiring to as an educator. And I also think, listening to you, that one thing I've learned is that the first time you teach anything, you're going to be terrible. The second time, you're going to be twice as good as that. And around the third to the fifth time, you're going to start to really be in the zone. But by the time you're teaching it for like the 10th time, you're going to go down again, because you're going to be so familiar with it. You're not going to have that beginner's mind anymore. So there's sort of a paraboler, as my high school teacher used to say, or an upside down paraboler. And for what it's worth, I think we all owe our first class of students a huge apology for what we subjected them to.
Yeah, definitely. I know I do. I tend to think like you can beat the 10-year stagnation if you're really paying attention to the kids, because the kids keep you fresh. Like, if you say something and it's not landing because you're on autopilot and you're aware that it's not landing, well, that kind of kicks you back in, and like, oh, I better find what makes this come alive, or it's not going to land.
Cassie,
Oh, go ahead.
Cassie, you're a pretty new teacher. What kind of support have you gotten in your school as a newish teacher?
Well, my department's very collaborative. However, I was hired like a few days before school started. It was like a really late hire. And so it was just basically survival my entire first year of like, I've never taught this curriculum before. I haven't done the curriculum because I'm from a different province. So it was just staying up till like 1 a.m. every night and teaching myself the material so that I could teach it the next day. So it was a lot of survival, but my department's pretty collaborative. So just like other history teachers were there to help me out if I needed anything. But at the end of the day, you're kind of just on your own with the kids in the class. So it's pretty much trial by fire. Like, you figure out what works as you go. And I think the thing with teaching is you just have to become okay with failure a lot, and like doing things that don't work and then not getting discouraged and then reiterating and doing it again. But it's the best way to learn. So it's been valuable, even if it's been tough.
Yeah, and I think, teaching is performance. Like, it is a performance. You are on stage. Whether you're a sage or not, you're up there. You better, you better have something to say, and you better know something, right? Because despite Paulo Freire saying that the banking model of education is bad, I think it's actually good because it reflects reality. So today I had a student who said, we're not as smart as you, Mr. Rossi. I was like, you definitely are smarter than me, because your brains are younger and you can learn things faster. I know more than you. I know a lot more than you. Okay, but I'm not smarter than you. I've had a lot of time because my brain was young like yours, and it absorbed all these things, and I know a lot of things. But me knowing things doesn't make me smarter. You're smarter than me because you could probably learn faster if you cared. So my job is to get you to care and to teach you stuff, right? Actual knowledge, which gets into another area, which is knowledge and content is now, the redheaded stepchild of education, right? Everything is skills, and everything is how can you, can you find the main idea of this paragraph, right? No kid, I'm sorry, ever starts reading something and says to himself, I'm going to find the main idea of this paragraph, right? They read a subject because they're interested in it. And there's studies about this. If you like baseball, you're going to read about baseball. If you like ghost stories, you're going to read ghost stories. So like, let's get back into like, there's actual, content and knowledge, and you'll learn how to find the main idea if you can start doing it with things you're interested in. And then even if things you're not interested in, that's the task of the teacher to like get you interested, right? And like, you're going to do this even though it's unfamiliar, and you'll find things to like about it because I'm going to show you things that are interesting in it.
Do kids still do book reports? That was the point of book reports, right? Was to find a book that you were interested in.
There's very little pursuit of individual preference, generally speaking, in our education system, which is a problem. And the other thing that I notice about Paul was talking about this skills-based approach. It's so backwards that we claim that we're making the classroom skills-based and also not teaching them any important life skills at the same time. There are no home economics classes. There are no, life skills. We don't teach that at all. And we don't require them to do homework or to manage their lives so we're claiming it's a skills-based education inside the classroom, and then meanwhile providing a consequence-free existence that doesn't teach them anything really about life. It's backwards.
And the skills thing is so vague. They always like, they talk about 21st century skills. Well, I don't even know what those are. And now with the development of AI, what we thought might be 21st century skills are going to be irrelevant in 5 years. So, I mean, like it feels, all that stuff to me feels like a cop out, and it feels like, um, it kind of gets buy-in because it's hard to get yourself to be as much of an expert in your content as you can. It takes a lot of work. And so I think for some, it's sort of an attractive idea to put the content aside and just work on whatever the skills are. Um, it just makes it easier. But you got to learn. I mean, when I found out I was going to teach economics, it was a week before school started, and I had to go through and learn everything and all the College Board stuff. And I had a bunch of really smart kids, and if I had to go over a problem, I would get in early. Obviously, I'd get in way before them, but I would post little notes to myself so they didn't know that I didn't have a grasp of it. Like if I was going to do something, I had this lectern podium, and I would put like, here's the steps on how to do this, and I would go through it step by step, glance down at it, and make sure that I was on the right path, and then turn around and pray that nobody raised their hand.
Smart kids are terrifying. And
They are.
has everyone here done I'm one chapter ahead of the kids the entire year?
I've been like a page ahead of them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first year I taught calculus, it was a shit show because, I kind of knew it, but the kids could tell. The kids didn't know it either, but they could tell that I didn't really know it that well either.
They can smell.
So like, it took me like a couple years of teaching calc to like really get it. And, 5 years is when I feel like I finally started to get my sea legs and like be able to do what I can do. But AI is an interesting thing too, because there's actually a place for AI in math if it's done right. But of course, it's creepy as hell, and I don't like it. But the idea that a kid can work on a problem and type in a math, like the next line in an equation, right? And then the AI assistant can say, oh, looks like you swap the variables here, try it again, right? This is like custom one-to-one feedback on how the kid is putting the equation in and what they did wrong. Like, oh, you divided instead of multiplying. Go back and read this part of the lesson. That's not telling them the answer, but it's sort of what I would say, not perfect, but it's kind of what I would say if I was over their shoulder. I see a place for that, right? Again, I'm not happy about all of the downstream consequences that every kid is going to have this sort of robot valet guiding them through things. It should be used in the right way, but I can see how, if there's possible, at least in math. I don't know about in any other subject. I wouldn't even begin to claim it's good in anything else. There's this company, well, Khan Academy, but there's Conmigo, which is their sort of AI attempt at this, and I'm still waiting on a beta version. So, but
Are you guys getting these Chat GPT essays, and how bad
Yeah,
are
absolutely. Although I am 100% so far in being unfooled. I mean, it's partly that the kids are not sophisticated themselves, but I suspect that it's that these platforms aren't as well. I mean, they're only as good as what you feed them. And so, I mean, this year I've had a number of times where, I've handed something back to a kid and they'll go, "How did he know? How did he know?" It's like, this is the most obvious thing I could possibly imagine.
they call it the uncanny valley, right? Where, have you heard that? It's just this chasm between reality and false reality, and it gives you the creeps.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've had some pretty long arguments recently with smart people. I do not believe that any of these programs are close to creating truly high quality art or literature. When it comes to, I mean, there's just such a gulf between the crafting of a sentence. F. Scott Fitzgerald does not live in that computer at this moment. You can just feel when something's human. I think it's probably true of music too. I've heard some of these like AI generated songs and stuff, and you're like, that's not human music. That's not joy. There's not, whatever animating spirit is in language and is in music is not in what's being produced right now. So, there's the idea that like we're very close to the end of the world here. I don't know. Come up with like one artful paragraph first, and then I'll be impressed.
Even
kind of reminds me of like Clash of the Titans. Remember that movie from the 80s? It's like, the hand puppets or whatever, like the claymation stuff.
Yeah.
And CGI, right? CGI is creepier, and you can't suspend your disbelief as much with the more technical thing. Whereas if you see the claymation thing, it's like there's a humanity to it that actually allows you to give yourself to the story because of the technical, the stop motion and all that stuff. It kind of feels more human.
I find
Sorry,
these
go ahead.
AI voices very chilling when I hear them in narration.
Yeah, I do think well, with movies, you think about the early Star Wars movies, right? They were all models and everything. I don't know if it's because I grew up on them, but to me, they're more aesthetically pleasing than the stuff with all the screens are so busy.
Mm.
And it is an element to it in music too. It's not necessarily the AI part, but I think why old people have a hard time connecting to modern pop music is because a lot of it is done. It's auto tuned, and it's not like the overt auto tuning, but there's some very slight uh, corrections that you can make, as opposed to back when you start recording and they just put it on tape and mistakes stayed in there. So like if you come in at the wrong spot in Louie, it's there forever. And there is a certain amount of humanity to that because
Right.
it's not perfect and it's not supposed to be perfect.
Yeah, like imperfection is perfect.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right.
My,
Well, oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say regarding the AI stuff in class, like for English, it's been terrible because it's so easy for them to do basic tasks like summarization using AI. And even essays, it's pretty good for essays. But my strategy lately has been just emotional blackmail. So if we all take an oath as a class, like a giant pinky swear, that we will not use AI, or else, perpetual guilt will follow you for the rest of your life. And you'll know you betrayed a valuable learning experience. And it works pretty well, especially if you have like a solid foundation of trust with that class. Like they take it pretty seriously. So that's been my only bulwark so far against AI. But
I think that's brilliant. It is emotional, but it's the guilt. It's like, I will be so disappointed in you.
I told my students too. I'm going to make handwriting great again. That's what.
Yeah.
So if it's written in their hand, and I told a bunch of them, like, listen, your handwriting's terrible. It's my job as a teacher to make you better at this. So here's your assignment. Good luck using AI when you have to write it out by hand and turn it in tomorrow.
Well, or better yet, write it out in hand in class. I think it's gonna bring us back to in-class essay writing, which I think everyone should have to do at some point.
I wonder, we're all kind of aligned on this. I wonder, like, are there teachers that believe in like total AI, right? They're all bought into this, and they're actually going to produce functioning adults. Like, maybe we're all wrong. Maybe there is something
A
to it,
teacher
but I
who
don't think so. And one of the things that I don't that I always like about teaching, and that which is sort of an anti-AI, is that it doesn't scale well. Like, an educational industrial complex, to the contrary, like there's something about teaching which is an art for each individual, and each teacher kind of does it slightly differently, and there's things you can learn from teachers, but it's kind of a folk art practice, right? Like, and it kind of, maybe like, it takes something happens in there which is, personal, it's individual, and it's performative, and there's something that comes out of that experience which can't really be bottled and sold. You
seems
can't
to
bottle it,
me
you can't sell it. You could talk about it, right? There are books written about, this teacher does this and it works, and this teacher does this and it works. But the idea of a systematic thing that anyone, like Jordan, you were saying, like, that you could just come in and paint by numbers and do it, and a machine can have an algorithm to teach, like, I'm not buying it. I don't think it can be done.
Well,
And
I think a teacher who believed in AI would just be replaced by a computer.
right, I
Like,
mean, maybe that's like, they would be a marketer for an AI firm or something.
right, who needs you? You're not a teacher then, yeah.
Yeah, it would be hard to. I mean, obviously, it can't replicate the human relationship, teacher and student, but I think I don't know if AI could be as flexible to when the kid, so a kid asks a question, that you didn't, that's kind of out of left field or whatever, but still has some sort of connection, and you got to tie it together. I don't know if, we're probably in the very early primitive stages of it developing, but and it might get there in some way. But I don't. The one thing that it won't be able to do is convey the passion for the topic. Like, AI is not going to come in the room and go, "Hey, we're going to do something great today." It's just it will be very cold and steely, and it just won't, you know. And it's kind of fun and I think kids, in a weird way, like it when you geek out on your topic.
Yeah, they'll just throw in more exclamation points. That's how they'll,
Hmm.
they'll express the passion. I
Without
mean, they could get better at it, but the thing is, like, I think the kids, like, this is what I think, like, the kids have to know kind of that you appreciate them and that you like them. Okay, like, there's that old saying that, if they don't know that you care, they won't care what you know,
Mm.
right? And that's a very sort of lefty thing, but I think it's true on a certain level. Um, and the idea that they would want to win the affections, or at least prove themselves to a robot, right?
Mhm.
um or functionally, basically, some computer code, right? I just don't see the validation for them. I think it leaves them high and dry in a way. Like, you cannot. It's sort of like those old experiments they did with the chimpanzees in the cage. Like, they would go to the stuffed animal, right, for most of the time in the cage, and then they would run, even though the stuffed animal didn't give them any food, and then they would run
The
to the
wire,
little, the food pellets, and then run straight back to the to
yeah,
the fuzzy mom figure. Like,
yep.
I think there's just not. It's sort of cheating them. It's cheating them out of a human experience with an adult, because we have this intergenerational, other than their parents, really, it's the only chance that kids have to interact with adults. um you know, because it's a nuclear family, there's not a lot of other relatives around. Sometimes even the nuclear family is broken. So it's the only outside adult that they can kind of experience being in their presence and getting validation like that. You can't replace that, I don't think, with a algorithm.
I think there's something powerful about someone you respect expecting more of you. And that's the part I don't think is replaceable by AI.
And how could it have a sense of humor? And there's a lot of funny stuff that happens in classrooms. It's just true. There every day there's some humorous interaction, especially when you have a group of 20-something kids all in one place. One of them's bound to be doing something funny, and that becomes part of the banter back and forth between the students and the teacher. I was calling on kids to take parts today, Shakespearean parts. I said, I need a Ross, I need a Lennox, I need a murderer. And one kid says, ooh, I said, I can see it. And everybody laughed, you know, but they want to participate when it's an environment where, you know, you're entertained.
And part of the game is they want to get you to laugh, or at least betray that you find it amusing, right? Even if you have to sort of quickly get back into the place of order, so that, but like these little rebellions and indulgences, they have to take place within the context of a larger purpose, but they add this sort of simmer and sizzle to the classroom, right? Like you can't, I mean, I guess you could kind of spoof that. I mean, I can see how you could kind of spoof it, but then there wouldn't be the joy of seeing it and knowing it was organic and knowing that they created it out of from another living being, you know. And I just don't see it happening. Unless the kids are fooled into thinking that it actually is a real person, which is always a possibility. Because I think we can all be fooled, but then we won't know who the robots are, and that's, you know, at that point I don't even want to know.
Yeah, it gets real
Just hook me up
dystopian
to
real quick.
Matrix.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's been about an hour. And I don't know, anybody have any final thoughts or?
Well, I hope we can do this again.
Yeah,
It's a
for
lot
sure.
of fun, and yeah, we'll bring on some more faces, some more voices.
Yeah, there's lots to talk about, and
Yeah, I think that, as Jordan was saying, I think teachers have the best stories, and it's endlessly entertaining being in the classroom. So yeah, I'm looking forward to more.
sounds good.
Thanks, Tyson.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, you guys.